I realized that there were people, no matter what I accomplished, they would never see me beyond my skin.
I am very grateful that we do have role models, Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama and Aretha Franklin for me.
I want them to know that I walked the same streets, but I never lost sight of what was important, and that was an education.
I look at young people now and they are excited that they have a mayor who looks like them.
They are loved. They are a unique creation of God, that they have a right to stand for social justice and racial equity.
Whether you want to be on the court, on a field, or in a front office, that your education is going to get you there. And if you're an athlete, that's a cherry on top.
It's time for us to get out of the shadows and be visible, because we can accomplish so much more when we're visible.
Welcome, I'm Kelly Jackson. This is Race, Listen, Learn, Live. Starting a meaningful conversation about race in America can often separate people before discussion even begins. Having that conversation can be uncomfortable. But if we don't create a dialogue, then people fool themselves into believing racism isn't that bad, that it doesn't exist. Our focus in this next hour is on Black women. Our hope, have an open mind. Listen to their experiences and help move the conversation forward. So let me introduce our panel. We begin with Reverend Tracy Blackmon. She's Associate General Minister, Justice and Local Church Ministries for the United Church of Christ. She's also a registered nurse. Last year, Kalia Collier was named Vice President of Community Relations for the St. Louis City Soccer Club. She also owns the St. Louis Surge, our city's professional women's basketball team. Mary Elizabeth Grimes is the president of Marion Middle School, the city's only all-girls Catholic middle school. She has more than 20 years of experience leading both nonprofit and for-profit organizations. Ella Jones is the first female and first African-American mayor for the city of Ferguson. She's also a pastor in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Sports Illustrated called Jackie Joyner-Kersee the greatest female athlete of the 20th century. In 1988, the six-time Olympic medalist established the Jackie Joyner-Kersee Foundation, helping youth in the greater East St. Louis area reach their potential. Dr. Javita Owuweri is a breast surgeon at SSM Health DePaul Hospital and an advocate for women's health. And finally, Denise Times, an accomplished jazz entertainer known locally and nationally. She also serves as the executive director of the Mildred Times Foundation for Pancreatic Cancer. We began by getting to know our panel a little better. I asked them to share their experiences of racism. Reverend Blackmon starts us off, remembering an incident in high school involving a college recruiter.
And this particular day was Harvard's day. I didn't have an interest in Harvard. I had been there and it wasn't for me. But of course, I had not articulated that to the recruiter. And so he presents in front of this class of 32 students, of which I am the only Black student. And he talks about how at Harvard, one could have an entry class of nothing but 4.0s with excellent college application scores. And so that wasn't enough, that you needed to have extracurricular activities. You need to have had accomplishments outside of just your grade. And so after his presentation, and those who were interested in Harvard were clamoring for him, I went to the refreshment table because I didn't want to go to Harvard. He made a beeline for me. He asked me, was I interested in going to Harvard? And I said yes, not because it was true, but because it was polite. To which he responded, well, everything I just said to your class, you don't have to worry about that. If you can manage to get a C out of this school, you can go to Harvard. In that moment, I realized, and it still makes me tear up, I realized that there were people in this world who would never see me, no matter what I accomplished. They would never see me beyond my skin. And he made the determination that my skin disqualified me from competing on the level that others could compete in my class. I made a promise to myself that day to prove him wrong.
You got me. You got me on that one. Because I think we have all been in that situation where they look at you and all they see is your color and not your abilities.
Right after the fatal shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, I ran for office, the first African-American woman running for councilwoman in Ward 1 in Ferguson. I won the election, but there shortly after, a couple people said some very ugly things about me. They called me a black N. And most of the people in the city say, oh, people say that all the time, but it's not right to call anyone a black N. And it seems like the Black people in Ferguson was really displeased with it. Some of the white people, but the majority of them act like it was just an everyday occurrence. So when people realized that I had reported it to the FBI and that they started investigating, then some people started taking it serious. And even today, as being mayor of Ferguson, it's not sad, but when I go around, I can feel it. And it is sad that in 2020, racism is still alive and is well, and people don't hesitate to try to make you feel like you don't belong, but yet you were chosen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. And this didn't even happen that long ago. This was a year ago.
I was born in Nigeria and did not come to this country until I was 10. And I have to honestly say that I did not know racism growing up.
Okay.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Okay, take your time.
Going through college, then getting into medical school when your advisors advised you to do something else. Well, maybe you could be a nurse, maybe you could be a pharmacist. You can't, well, why are you thinking of being a doctor? But my grades are good enough. But why don't you think about something else? But despite that, I went on to go to medical school, but it didn't end there because I decided to be a surgeon and was told that I should be something else. I should be a pediatrician. I should be an internist. I should be a family practice. Why surgery? Why would you want to be a surgeon? So these were things that were being told to me every step of the way by people that did not look like me. But by the grace of God, I had people that looked like me in my family, and subsequently my husband, whom I met during residency, who let me know that I was good enough, that I could do it. And truly, without that support, I wouldn't be here. And I feel so bad for every woman that looks like me that don't have the type of support that I did growing up to get me to where I am today.
I was in the 3rd grade and a kid spit on me and he called me the N-word. And I remember going home and telling my father that, and he was livid. Like my mother was livid. And the first thing, my dad said, if he puts his hands on you, if he does anything like that, raised in a Black family, you hit them back. And so the next day I went back to school, little boy, same thing, it's incredibly hateful. He pushed me and I punched him in the stomach. It was a moment, I ended up being reprimanded. I remember going into the principal's office and they had to call my parents. And my parents came to the school and they said, your daughter put your hands on this young man And my father said, she did exactly what I told her to do. And what are you going to do to this young man? And I remember these incidents as a kid. And I think the only thing that saved me being in a predominantly white school was that I played sports. I'm reading a book called Black Fatigue at the moment because I couldn't really process what I've been experiencing. And it's like, it's hitting me so heavy because I'm remembering all these things as a kid. And now I'm experiencing them again as an adult.
Wow. It's traumatic. It can be traumatic.
Growing up in East St. Louis, and really every step of the way throughout my athletic career, that you had people either protected you from certain things that you didn't know was wrong until someone called you out your name. You know, I break the word record. I was never good enough. Every time I did something, oh, I'm on drugs, I'm on this. It's not that my ability is the best. That is something is wrong with me. But I can internalize that because then it would start eating at me. And then all of a sudden I am down and I'm starting to doubt myself. I am one that believe I can turn a doubter into a believer. You know, working with Mary Elizabeth, bright, smart, intelligent. Now they see, oh, it's a beautiful woman. Oh, they don't know anything. You know, why we can't have it all? Because we possess it all.
I'll take up where she left off. I mean, you know, certainly Kalia and Jackie have spoken my name, but I love everyone here. You're my sisters, and at some point in my life's journey, we have crossed paths in some way. And race is one of those things that is weaponized, and you know, people don't realize that. I was part of what St. Louis called its effort to integrate. But integration in St. Louis at that time was me getting on a bus in my neighborhood with my entire fourth grade class, including my fourth grade teacher. We got off of the bus at a white school in South City and went to a classroom. The only time I ever saw another white student was on the playground or at gym. At the end of the day, we got back on the bus and then we went home. That was obviously not integration.
I would say that my experiences in racism has been more since I've been in the genre of theater and music. And because, you know, and then along with that, you know, some of the other isms that I've had to experience, because I was too tall, I was too big, I wasn't light enough, my hair wasn't straight enough, or whatever the case may be. So it's just an ongoing thing. I mean, you could pick up the phone and call a customer service line, and once they look at your information or detect in your voice that you're Black, you're treated a totally different way. So it's an ongoing thing that you become numb to it.
We've documented their stories.
I started feeling ill at home. The coughing was the worst side effect that I had.
I could not talk. That's how I was talking.
Black women detailing their battle with COVID-19.
The worst symptom for me was the chest pressure and a little bit of kind of difficulty breathing. That part was definitely the most scariest because like once I had it, I just really didn't know what to expect.
Nearly a year into the pandemic, studies show Black women were the hardest hit, not just by the virus, but by the economic domino effect that followed.
To be honest, I think that we knew health disparities were always there, but I don't think we ever observed it in this dramatic fashion as we have in COVID times.
Dr. Farron Mannion is the chairman of the Department of Medicine at Mercy Hospital, St. Louis. He says he noticed immediately the virus was not affecting the population in an equal way.
Some of it, again, has to do with their societal role, because often Black women may be the head of the household and they have obligations to, raising kids and taking care of their parents.
In addition to that, statistics from the World Health Organization show women are 1.8 times more likely to have lost their jobs due to coronavirus. African Americans are twice as likely to have lost their jobs compared to white Americans, and 70% of healthcare workers are women.
I'm not surprised by that statistic, but we obviously have to do better. And it's something that I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily know about or take into consideration.
Keena Muhammad is an account manager in St. Louis. She says until society makes some changes, it's up to women of color to
take care of yourself. When I got COVID, I was focused on getting better. Nothing else mattered to me, because at the end of the day, if you're not going to take care of yourself, then how are you going to be expected to take care of other people and keep other people safe?
Reporting in St. Louis, Jasmine Payute, 5 on your side.
So I want to start with Dr. Oruwari. As a doctor, what are your feelings on how this has really affected the Black community?
Well, Kelly, it's really been devastating. And I think a lot of us did not really know the true impact in the beginning. So it's not probably till the second half of 2020 that we started to really see it. And I think the problem is that a lot of us in the Black community did not take this seriously also. And because of that, we did not take the appropriate precautions that we needed to take. And a lot of the reason we've been impacted the most is because of a lot of the predisposing conditions that are higher in the African American community, the hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, etc. Because all of those things are the things that make COVID disease even worse. And we have that, plus then not adhering to the restrictions. The way I've seen it impact my patients for what I do is that because a lot of my patients have not been able to go in for mammography like they normally would, we've got a huge backlog of women that haven't gone in for their screening mammograms. So now in early 2021, we're having women start to go back for screening. And we're seeing lots of breast cancers that we should have diagnosed last year that we're now seeing, and it's just far more advanced than it should have been last year. So it's still early data that we're seeing on this, but the numbers are going to get much worse. And unfortunately, it's the African American community that is most impacted by this.
I want to delve a little deeper into the mental well-being of how everyone is doing. How are you all handling it mentally? And JJK, I know that your community center, you have played a role in testing and food distribution. So I guess it's a two-part kind of question.
So mentally, I'm doing well. To have the JJK Center and to be a resource to the community, we partner up with the state so they could provide drive-through testing to encourage the community at large to get tested. But then sometimes, we don't take advantage of the things that's available to us. You should take your safety seriously. So wearing that mask, you need to wear that mask. Don't get complacent, don't get comfortable, because this is a virus out here. We're learning as we go, and so providing food, doing just some of the things that we would normally do, but then going outside of what we would normally do when we first shut down was delivering hot meals to our families, and just trying to make sure that having the JJK Center, how can we, be an asset, to the community, but safety is first and foremost.
I'd like to add something else into this conversation, Kelly, because what COVID has provided for us is a glimpse of the intersection. COVID is at the intersection of racism, sexism, and economic inequality. though the images of essential workers that we receive are the physicians and the nurses, and thank God for them. But there are other essential workers in our neighborhoods, daycare workers, bus drivers, school teachers, nursery teachers. All of these people typically are Black or Hispanic in St. Louis, predominantly Black. Those people were not triaged in the first level of PPE. People were saying that Black people in neighborhoods should wear masks. At the time I was still pastoring a church in those neighborhoods, there were no masks. We actually had to do a campaign as Black churches and raise money. The head of Twitter gave us $1 million to buy PPE. We hired Black women pharmacists to develop sanitizer because we couldn't get it, to begin putting it in the neighborhoods so that those essential workers could actually have them. If you are working for minimum wage, it is impossible for you to house a family on minimum wage. So many Black women work multiple jobs to keep a roof over the head of their children, right? And they don't have the luxury of isolating and staying home, because if they don't go to those jobs, then their family has nowhere to live.
The only positive that I've seen that's come out of COVID is that it's exposed a lot of these inequalities to people that ordinarily would not be thinking about the inequalities, because this was the only time in a long time in history when most people were home, most people were on their computers, on their phones, on their devices, people were engaged. So people are aware of what's going on. They're aware that African Americans are dying at disproportionate rates. They're aware of what happened to George Floyd. They're aware of all of the police brutality. So a lot of these inequalities are now coming forward.
COVID has done so many things. It keeps grandparents from seeing their grandchildren. It keeps us from seeing our parents. It has interrupted so many wonderful things that we do, and music is one of them. And I don't even want to imagine what the world would be like without music. I'm grateful for the venues that are trying to stay open so that artists can work. But we are suffering on every level. And I just want people to know that we are. And so if you have a favorite artist, I encourage people to reach out to that artist. Don't ask them how they are. Just reach out to them and do what you can.
My name is Rihanna Wise. I am the executive director for Almost Home. I am also a wife and a mother of 6 children and 2 beautiful dogs. Raising Black children in 2021 looks a lot different than I originally expected at this point in my life. I raised 2 Black boys, and they are 20 and 18 years old. And to this day, even though they don't live in my home, they still need to check in. I still need to make sure I know where they are. I teach them how to, if they get pulled over, what that looks like. Having children during a time of unrest and George Floyd and everything that was going on, we had to talk to our children about what was happening in America and how it was important that, they followed the rules. My husband and I have been very intentional about teaching our children about diversity. So encouraging them to make sure that, we have friends with everyone. We live around neighbors that, don't always look exactly like us. We are big on diversity. However, we always have to remind them, unfortunately, who they are, and the color of their skin does make a difference. The one thing I would want to say is I want them to be advocates. I want them to be intentional about loving other people. Let's see about our neighbors. Let's check in and make sure that, our seniors are doing good during this time. I want them to think about people and make sure that they're always saying, how do we help our community so that the community is well?
Let's talk about raising and mentoring Black children. I know some of you have children. I'm sure most of you have had the talk, you know, those unwritten rules that you tell your kids to follow to ensure that they stay safe and get home alive. What do you say to the young people in your lives about police interaction, or those who may not like them because of the color of their skin?
I just had a recent conversation with my son. My son is 20, and he just had to drive back this week to Pittsburgh to school. His dad and I were really nervous because he's a young Black man driving by himself in a brand new car. And yeah, we sat him down and we talked to him. Make sure you have all of your paperwork in order because they may think you stole the vehicle. Make sure if you get stopped, you keep your hands where they can see it. You don't reach for anything. And it's unfortunate that this is a conversation that we have to have with our young Black kids. But it is, because it's scary out there. It honestly is scary. Every time that I know that they are on a drive somewhere, I do not rest until I know that they are back where they're supposed to be.
I'm nervous all the time when my son goes out the door. And then the George Floyd movement did not make it any better for us who are raising our Black sons. And, you know, where you're just pulled over because of the color of your skin. You know, the only thing that, you know, we can do is keep praying and just keep coaching our young men on how to handle themselves.
Mayor Jones.
Everyone is talking about community policing. However, community policing is more than just interacting with the young people, but setting policies that when a young person is stopped by a police officer, it's a certain way the police officer should address that young person. Even though we as Black mothers have given our children a talk, also we are working on the police officers on how they are to address the African-American population when they stop.
If you have or had a daughter, what advice would you give her about maneuvering through our world? Mary Elizabeth.
I have a granddaughter, and during the George Floyd protests, one of the things that concerned her was, is this what I have to look forward to as I grow up in life? That was very painful for me to hear, because historically, and I try to give her a historical perspective on things. You know, she's not seeing where throughout history that she and people who look like her are necessarily valued for what it is they accomplish. And what I say to her, and I say to Marion girls, this is your time, your moment. At the moment of your birth, you were purposed with making an impact in this world. You're uniquely equipped to be able to do that. It is not about ourselves. It is about how we are able to do for others. And that's why I appreciate this panel of women, because I see that across our community spectrum, that's what they're doing.
I am very grateful that we do have role models, you know, some that were mentioned, you know, Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama and Cicely Tyson and Oprah Winfrey. I'm so glad that these women, that, you know, our daughters have had a chance to experience these women, but it does not minimize the women that we experienced. By no means, you know, Shirley Chisholm and Maya Angelou and Aretha Franklin for me, you know, so it doesn't minimize the women that came before us, but my goodness, you know, they really have an opportunity to really soar and to really shoot for the stars. And one of the things I tell them is You know, don't compare yourself to anybody else in terms of where you are in your life. Your journey is your journey, and it is meant for you, and you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
I want to tap into what Mary Elizabeth shared about having a faith background. Dig deep into it, because that word anava, which is translated humility, does not mean to shrink or to be submissive or to be passive. It actually literally means to occupy the correct amount of space given you by God. Occupy all of it. Just don't try to take somebody else's space. And this is important to Black women, because I, as a pastor and as a mother of a woman child, a womanish child, what I want her to know is that all the space God has given her is hers to occupy. And she doesn't have to diminish herself or shrink or act like she knows less or act like she's weaker. Be who God has called you to be. Walk in it. And the humility comes by recognizing that that same God has gifted other people too.
If it means standing on the house floor, being very unapologetic and very loud about our struggles, that's what I'm going to do.
In our next half hour, Black women shattering the glass ceiling in Washington.